Top Nation. I'm very privileged to have my guest Mark Smith today from Wildcats Coaching and Training. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, Corey, how are you doing?
Doing great. Hope you're doing well and safe over there. And right now you're in the UK.
Yeah, I'm in England, and absolutely, it's pretty warm. Been for a run, so all good, thanks.
Excellent. Now, you've done work both in South Africa, Europe, North America, as well as India. You're known for your leadership and performance work, and in particular with men. So love to hear from you, kind of your founder's story. How did you get into the field, and what's kind of that driving purpose that, not just got you into this, but, what keeps you there?
No, that's a great question. And you used the word purpose. So if I was to start way back and say to you, firstly, as a student, I was always kind of interested in philosophy. I had a job in the Cape, Western Cape in South Africa, and then was transferred up to Johannesburg and left behind friends, girlfriend, and a lot of my attachments. And I fell into a kind of a bit of a rut. So I went on the search for meaning. You've heard that expression before.
The hero's journey.
Correct. And that's a very apt thing that you just said there, and I'll tell you why in a second. So at the age of 26, I found a life skills course, ended up staffing on that course, and obviously it's a giveaway. It's not something I was ever paid for. Went on a spiritual kind of journey as well to kind of look within and find out what my core values were, settled on my core 5 values, which have basically been the real grounding ways that I've led my life from there on in, or attempted to. And then obviously, the coaching side of things came about from having discovered that I was on a path with regards to personal development. I had been running my own company, which was a promotional agency in the music industry. So of course there was lots of partying and all the rest of it. And like I said, I was on this search for meaning. So a couple of things happened, and I ended up with a very strange and very interesting therapist, and she asked me why I'm here. And I said to her, I'm a teacher. And I nearly fell off my chair when I answered her, because I didn't like teachers when I was at school. So yeah, it really became something that I sat with, and with all of the work that I'd been doing on myself, it finally occurred to me that I had quite a lot to give. So I went into the business world and started, I closed my company and then started with a lot of training and development, and that really became a trajectory and a focus. And it started, of course, with sales training and a whole lot of that stuff, and then ended up by me building a leadership course based on some of the coaching skills that so I studied coaching in 2005 and 2006, an executive course, and then did my certification through the ICF in 2011. And it's just been coaching and self-directed learning have for me been a real awakening in terms of how people learn. And that's kind of where the journey has stuck, I suppose.
Awesome. Well, I know you're an avid learner, and, to that point, with your travels and that, you have functional ability in about 5 languages, and which is pretty darn good, because I'm still looking to master the English language. And, anyone that has more than one, I have tremendous respect for.
Well, you should try walking around in England. There's lots of people here who can't speak English.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of people around the world who it might be their first language and can't speak it, but
yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a bit about leadership.
Yes.
I know when we were talking earlier, you're talking about leadership and performance and this passion you have about talking around ethical and that servant leadership type approach. Tell us a little bit more about, your thoughts on leadership and performance.
Firstly, I can't claim to be having led, be one of those guys who's led a massive organization and had, I'm steeped in leadership of thousands of people. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of a coach and having worked with many leaders as a coach and leadership teams, not from the inside, but from the outside, which in coaching circles we call the clarity of distance. So hopefully there is some clarity in my thinking. So there's a couple of things which I'd like to, loop in here from the perspective of a kind of a thread. And the one is my interest in philosophy. The other thing I mentioned, which was around values, and then obviously leadership. So I guess what has happened for me is that I've looked around and I've seen a lot with organizations from the perspective of bottom line, quarterly results and real focus on business goals and achievements. And I read once somewhere, I read a really interesting book called Snakes in Suits, When Psychopaths Go to Work. And I've heard the organization described as the same profile as a psychopath, as in organizations often have no conscience. So, we can go in as a company or as a group, an organization, and cause harm, and nobody takes the blame. There's no accountability. So I suppose my philosophy has driven from that, which is that, and I read recently, there's a guy, what's his name, John Mackey, Conscious Capitalism, where he speaks about higher purpose, stakeholder orientation, conscious leadership, and conscious culture. And I think that's a really good focus, in terms of the way the world is going. If we are to create organizations with a conscience, which are consciously available and can make an impact in the world, from the perspective of if we're an organism rather than an organization, and Simon Sinek talks about the infinite mindset. So if we've got an infinite mindset, creating an organism which is going to evolve and move with society, with the world, and contribute rather than remove value, then I think we've got a sustainable approach.
Absolutely. And in the hot model of performance I developed in my PhD studies, I talk about because goals have KPIs and, performance metrics. A lot of times, again, the obvious one is the financial end they talked about. But there's two things that the individuals on a team are looking for, because if we want buy-in and a level of motivation and a performance culture versus a carrot and stick model, before the goal, there's the idea of purposeful goal striving. So people have their own values and desires. And if that lines up with the actual goals of the organization, then there's that purposeful goal striving.
Kismet.
And then if the goals, as they get into doing it, they can see kind of the impact and the meaningfulness and the work in that the goal striving, if there's experienced meaningfulness, that's those two things, either purposeful goal striving or experienced meaningfulness, are like superchargers. And that's what changes the culture. And those are driven from stuff at the subconscious level versus the conscious. And, it's interesting you speak to that because that's a huge part of my own beliefs.
Yeah.
Now, you've brought up values and you talked about, doing that journey yourself, and you had 5 core values. What are some of the values that, obviously that clarity shifted and really changed your life? And are those 5 values still the same today as they were back then? Because sometimes, we can, morph as we learn more and mature.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see, if you feel comfortable sharing what some of those values are. There was a change or consistency.
Yeah, no, one of the other things that I appreciate in terms of leaders, and I've really seen some incredible and worked with some incredible leaders. Specifically, I'm thinking of two guys, one in South Africa and one in India, who are really available and kind of willing to be vulnerable with their people. So it wouldn't be very good if I was not willing to step into that space as well. So yeah, I'm completely willing and available for that. So my 5 are reality, as in I'm going to be real with you. Love, I've got to have love and passion for what I do, and for obviously my driver is my children, setting an example and being the best father that I can be, and showing up in that way. Integrity, stretch, I'm always challenging myself, and trust, and I operate from the position of I trust people. And I've been in the situation where I probably should have been a bit more alert to possible danger signs in terms of those snakes in suits that I've had a couple of dealings with. But I'd rather have that than go into a situation with people and not have any trust, because then it's kind of guarded, and then I need to be walking in with 4 lawyers in front of me. I don't do that.
Yeah, well, I've been there, and I share that. But even in those instances where we went in with that optimism or trust, and it burned us because not everyone's going to share the same values. We always learn from that, or we can use that as an opportunity to learn. We don't.
Absolutely.
I shouldn't use a blanket statement like we always learn. Maybe that's just applied to me or you, and hopefully people learn from the experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that ties into our theme, right? If we've got a conscious organization, firstly, that stuff will happen a lot less. And secondly, the lessons could be less painful, as well as, grow the organization in a positive way.
Yes. And when we were having our discussion, you talked about when it came to leadership, we have to talk about how we think, communicate, and lead. Can you speak to those 3? Because I thought that was really good, because that covers a lot of ground. And I'd like to hear more about, what that means to you and how you've worked that into the practice you do.
Okay. Well, that's a massive question, Corey. I think maybe we need 10 podcasts.
I was going to say, well, it was interesting you brought that up, because the more and more I think about it, the more and more, that's a deep and wide conversation.
Yeah.
So, it might be a bear to tackle and a succinct to answer, but it came out of your mouth, and I thought, okay, I wrote it down, and I thought,
you just didn't warn me you were going to ask that question. So I'll give it a shot. So, based on what we've been talking about in terms of conscious leadership with an infinite mindset, with a value set, and also with some kind of trust and love in there, as opposed to fear, then, how we think will be from the perspective of what is possible rather than what is a danger, always looking for the threat. So, and we can go into various different models on threat and reward in terms of how the brain works. So we are wired for threat. And so I think as a leadership tenet, to focus on what is possible and what we can create and where value is, and to, as John Mackey says in terms of conscious leadership, and he speaks in his book about self-awareness. So knowing when I'm thinking about things which are a threat to me and that I may react and respond in a different way, that gives me the choice to choose to respond in a way that is better for the organization and better for the organization in the future. So, and then that will drive how I communicate with the people that I'm working with. I'm not coming from a place of fear. I'll come from a place of what is possible and empowering people to, come back to me with ideas and what is the thought leadership within the organization. Because the thinking organization, which is Peter Senge's work, is for me also really, really enlightening, or in this particular mode. I think so. We think and then communicate in a way which is balanced in our value set and in consciousness, rather than in reactivity and pure profit drive,
and congruent.
And congruent, exactly.
Is congruency,
Yeah, I've been working with a lady who did her master's on the female brain, and we came up with a collaborative leadership approach, and we've got quite a radical view that men and women should lead together in organizations, that it shouldn't just be a board of males, that there should be a 50-50 split, and that would bring in both the cross-brain thinking as well as the front-back male brain thinking, and potentially we could create a powerhouse.
Yeah. Well,
what was the third one? You said think, communicate, and leading.
Leading really is the outcome of the thinking and communicating.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to get you and your friend in on a podcast together. I don't think I've had, a three-way conversation on the podcast, and it would be interesting to be able to see, the male and female perspectives on the topics as we went through.
Yeah. Oh, she's an American, funnily enough, whom I met in South Africa, and she and I, with a bunch of other really talented coaches that I've been working with, been very grateful to work with some exceptional human beings in the South African government. So she's the one that I've been working with, and the collaborative leadership approach is something that we have on hold at the moment because I'm here in the UK and she's in South Africa. But we'll pick that up and put something together.
Absolutely. And for context for listeners, we're still in the middle of this COVID-19 situation here in June of 2020, and you had went to the US because you were looking at possibly moving there and helping with some business development company we would do work with. Went back to South Africa with your wife, and then...
I didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I came to the UK to visit my dad. It was his birthday. I had a visa which was going to expire in a month. And as you said, I was looking at having meetings with various different organizations in the US to see what the business development possibilities were, and then got locked down here.
Right. And your wife is still in South Africa as well,
yeah,
right?
She came here with me, and then her best friend's husband tragically passed away, and so she went to go and be with her, and then got locked down in South Africa, so I've become a bachelor, doing my own laundry and everything.
Yeah. Well, and it speaks to your own resiliency and strength. It's tough enough, I think, going through this situation for people, but when one of your biggest values is love, to be isolated, we're all somewhat isolated because of this situation, but to be isolated from those ones you love most, and to be able to continue to persevere and bring impact and value to others in light of this speaks to your character.
Thanks, Corey. We spoke about meaning, and I'm very philosophical about life, and I think that everything is as it should be. And I've been given the great privilege of spending time with my parents, my sister and her family, whom I don't normally see very much. I've got two very precious nieces, and so that's been a real gift. And hopefully this COVID thing's over soon, and I can fly, or my wife can fly, or my children certainly need to see their dad as well.
Absolutely. Well, I pray that for you guys as well. So tell me a bit about the work you're doing specifically with men and how they show up as real men, because there's this pressure around providing and security that is, a stereotype that's been built up, as a protector and that, and there's, certain emotional charges attached to that. But we talked about how it might be a bit of a misdirection of priorities from some of those values and that you have, that you talked about. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about how you're working with men in terms of the, how men need to show up, and leaders in general, because I know you've done a lot with men, but this applies, across culture and across gender, whatever.
Yeah, look, we can speak about leadership, and I think that you're right. It does apply across gender and all sorts of boundaries. If I was, however, to ring fence your question towards the work with men and what I've learned in terms of how we show up, I think the archetypical story that men are given in terms of being the tough guy or the provider. I certainly felt that when I was at school, when I, experienced some, 3 or 4 guys, giving me a hard time. I certainly felt that, it was my duty to show up and stand up and try and be a cowboy, and yet I was scared out of my wits because it was one of me and 4 of them. So there's a cognitive dissonance, right? So this is my experience and this is how I'm reacting. So therefore I must be bad, wrong, not good enough, or whatever the choices I've made. And then as a result of feeling on the back foot, I might react to that in whatever ways, which could be acting out, essentially. So the work that I've been doing with the Mankind Project, which is a nonprofit started in the US and that is now a worldwide organization, has been revolutionary for me in terms of, hell, my wife will tell you I'm a better man as a result of working on me as a man rather than just me as a human being and how I show up. So I mentioned earlier vulnerability. So, one of the things I do with my wife is I say when I'm wrong and I admit that I screwed up. And I also keep my word. So if I say to her I'm going to do something, I will do it. Otherwise, I've learned to set boundaries and say to her that I won't do some certain things and say to her that's not available or it's not possible for me. I've planned my day and you've asked me a bit too late, so I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen. And so there's a lot for me around what is called the axis mundi, which is that center, that solid, grounded maleness that doesn't have to be aggressive or vicious at all, and yet boundaried, strong, solid, and firm. And so that's something that I've been working with a lot of men who've taught me. I've had mentors in that organization. It's really incredible. There's an incredible amount of mentorship and inter-country mentorship as well. I mean, I've worked with a guy in Canada, David Cordes. There's a man in the States called Judge Mattox, who's been an incredible teacher for me along racial boundary leadership and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, generational gaps too, I would think.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, absolutely. I've worked with some men who are in their 60s and obviously in their 20s. So that's been incredible. So how that has helped me has been when I'm working with leaders, and a lot of them are male, I'm able to get below the surface and dig into what are the drivers behind how you're showing up as a man, how you're showing up as a leader. And I'm about to go and work with another organization which is based in the UK and the States, and they specifically coach male business leaders. So they've asked me to join the ranks, and I'm very excited about that prospect.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, to do everything you do at a high performance level and to be able to show up with that integrity, you obviously have certain habits and practices and priorities that you have to work into your own life. What are some of your success practices, that and habits that keep you able to perform at a high level?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Corey. Sometimes I don't perform at a high level.
Well, we can't always be in the high performance zone,
Yeah.
Otherwise we'd burn out.
Yeah, exactly.
Any strength overused becomes a weakness. It's like confidence on the extreme is what? Arrogance,
I suppose.
Right? If we work out too much, we risk injury.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that high performance for me also means being, one of my values is reality, being real. So I'm real in that, I have periods where I stop exercising, where I probably, drink a few too many beers over a period of time and, and enjoy myself. So one of the things that I think in terms of a high performance habit is continuously working on yourself, not from the perspective of self-criticism, on the perspective of personal mastery. So I'm always looking to get better, to be a better human, to be a better man, to be a better citizen, to be a better coach, whatever it happens to be, whichever father, husband, different roles, son, different roles in my life. So that's something that I think is worthwhile, is thinking about those things. How am I showing up in all of those areas, and then focus on one and work on it.
Yeah. One thing I'm hearing too is a groundedness embedded in that is, even when you get great opportunities and get to perform, there's a groundedness that you have. And a humility that I think comes with groundedness. I mean, your preface to this, speaks to that.
The next word that I was going to bring up on my list, because I obviously prepared for this meeting, was humility. So, I think the groundedness for me has been a good one. So I've studied and worked with the Enneagram, and I'm a 7 home base on the Enneagram, which tends to be the thinker, the living in the future, the visionary kind of, excited kind of leader. Mm-hmm. And what I need in order to be grounded is running, mountain biking, or, some kind of mindfulness and that kind of thing, which, as I said, I went for a run before this. So that's part of the working on myself, is that I'm conscious of what I need. So that helps the groundedness, I think, and thanks for spotting that. Humility, I've those 2 leaders I mentioned. The one is a CEO, runs 5 companies in the insurance business in South Africa, and the other one runs a big IT company in India. They're the most humble, down-to-earth, really great men, and I've seen both of them really great with their people from the perspective of humility, not in any way lauding it above people or positioning themselves, which is I think quite unusual, and from the global perspective. The last one, you said to me to present 3, and the other one that for me that I work on consciously and constantly is gratitude. I mean, I have a niece who has cerebral palsy, and I'm just grateful that I can feed myself. I know that's a really basic thing, but she can't. And she's going to get she's 13 now, she's going to get into her 20s and stuff. And, she doesn't have a fully functioning body. And yet she has a really great attitude to life. And she rides horses, and she's got a dream to be an Olympic equestrian. And yet she's got massive challenges. And I think that gratitude is for me is key to being balanced.
That's awesome. And I love the story of your cousin. I grew up with a close cousin with cerebral palsy and family members. One of my best friends has CP and MS, and is actually the co-author of the book with Kirk and I that came out last summer called The Journey. And
I'm going to pick that up.
Yeah, I'll get you a copy. I'll send you a copy after this, Mark, and I'll make sure Kirk, Wayne, and I sign it for you. But yeah, and the last podcast that we put out, Luke Pierce, he was the silver medalist with the men's Paralympic hockey team for Canada. Yeah. And, he is now the assistant coach with the Edmonton Oil Kings and has worked, with Hockey Canada and that. But he said, that experience working with those group of men, that was the biggest win and that he's ever experienced, just getting to work with them. So I know that level of inspiration that can bring. And my mother was in a car accident, and she was one of not only my biggest cheerleaders, but my biggest inspiration. And when she got in a car accident, she became a quad. So I also got to see, how mindset and, priorities get snapped into place when, we see people with challenges or adversities, that help us be more grateful. And, this, my, in my signature, I always say with gratitude. That's my signature. So I love that you say that. And, obviously there's a reason we're here talking today, because there's a lot of alignment between us, and we've become, pretty close friends here in the past couple months, with everything we've been able to do together. And I sure appreciate that.
Yeah, me too.
Last question, and it's a big one. 100th birthday celebration. I might have one more after this. I might have one more, but I want to hear 100th birthday celebration. Yeah. Who do you want there, and what do you want them saying about you?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind, and I was hoping not to have to answer this question, though you did warn me it was a possibility.
Yeah.
I haven't I haven't prepared for this one at all. So this is completely off the cuff. My children. Yeah, I've got a spirit daughter who's my wife's daughter from a previous marriage, and whom I've parented from the age of 8. Danielle, my daughter Ariel, and my son Marcel. So, really the three of them and my wife, those are the people who matter to me, and I would want them to be there, and I've asked them actually to give me a Viking burial, to push me off on a raft in the middle of a lake and then fire an arrow and set me alight and then drink whiskey. So that was kind of, I'm thinking of starting a business on creative send-offs. Although I think it's completely illegal, so I can't do that. But
it's not in Nepal. I actually saw that while I was in Nepal. Yeah.
Okay.
And so along the river there, they have, I can't remember if it's every night they have the ceremonies, and there's multiple people there that, they put them on a bed of things, and
Wow. Okay, so I'll go and look at that. So that obviously it's my family, my nearest and dearest, my reason for trying to be as good a human being as I can is for them. Mm-hmm. And then if obviously I don't know who else of my family, my nieces and my sister and her husband and the close family, some of my wife's family, whom I've grown very close to, even though we've got a cultural divide. I mean, I'm born in England and my wife is born in South Africa, of an Afrikaans German extraction mother and a Lebanese father. So her side of the family are alien to me, and I had to kind of learn their culture, but they're great people. So what would I want from a celebrity perspective? I'd like to call some people back from the grave, like Jim Morrison and David Bowie, and have them come and play at my funeral. If Jim Morrison was to play, or not at my funeral, at my 100th birthday, if Jim Morrison was to play "Come On Baby, Light My Fire" at my 100th birthday, that would be
as awesome. They're pulling the bow.
Yeah, so the 100th birthday could well be a funeral.
at this stage, if we make 100, that's the win.
Absolutely. Well, a friend of mine's mother lived to 103, and she was sharp and didn't lose her faculties at all. So, what a blessing. The challenge, as I've seen with my dad, he's had a couple of issues with his heart, etc., and the medication is a thing that is causing his body to let him down. So he's all perfectly fine, and yet his body's not necessarily coming along with him, and that's really frustrating. So when it gets to old age, some of those things get in the way. But I think 100th birthday for me would not be complete without a single malt, preferably Irish.
Excellent. Well,
yeah.
I will join you in one of those when we connect.
Yeah, that'll be great.
I know there's a bunch of things on your agenda going into the summer and that in terms of direction moving forward. One of them is you're doing some specialized training in quantum energy coaching. What are some other areas that you see and trends kind of looking into the future that you want to be part of and dig into a little more?
Yeah, that's again is a really big question, Corey. So I guess, I read Quantum Warrior, The Future of the Mind by John Kehoe, who's a countryman of yours. Love to meet that guy. I'd love him to be at my 100th birthday party. That would be amazing, because I'd love to chat to him about what I've manifested in my life. And that's what his book was around. So linking that back to your question and the quantum energy coaching, I think that we as a species can manifest what and how our experience of life on Earth evolves. There's another guy called David Bohm who spoke about the implicate order of things and how things unfold. And he was a physicist, and he studied waveforms, and he spoke about how we're kind of there's more of a wave than an A to B. I'm by no means a physicist. I just love the way he thinks, and I think that in leadership, for me, if I could be part of assisting leaders to think in a way which is around evolving themselves, their cultures, their organizations in a way which is positively impactful to the earth and everything that we experience as human beings, that would be pretty incredible, and I'd love to be part of that. Personally, I've got a dream to have these adventure. So I call myself an adventure coach. I take clients out mountain biking and hiking and running and various things, and I coach them on the go, because you've got blood, oxygen, and obviously water, hydration, which makes us think clearer. So I'd love to have adventure spots all around the globe, in places like Thailand, obviously in Southern Africa. I already have a spot which I've built in the UK, in the US, where teams of leaders can go and work on their conscious leadership. That would be an incredible bucket list.
I love it. And it's interesting, that approach, because I don't know if I shared with you, I worked with Joe DeSena and Spartan Race and helped develop the Spartan X program. And, that whole idea of working through physical challenges or obstacles, and we know, and from my days in the military, I know that going through challenges and adversity brings together the team cohesion and the group, and it makes us better prepared, not just in terms of being resilient, but in terms of our efficacy and confidence in facing challenges and obstacles moving forward. And, one thing that saddens me is this whole move to try and minimize the challenges and obstacles in our way and get rid of competition, and things like that, because the reality is, when we're put out in situations, we're measured, we're compared, right? We want to be grounded as individuals and not be tied and have our identity tied to roles or the achievements, but, to deny that, your first value, you said, was, reality and being real. And, I just don't think that that's an artificial approach to, life, and it not strengthening us. If anything, it's, weakening human culture and resilience. And
you're right. There's an instant gratification thing with smartphones, ordering online, getting things that we want, doing business online, not having to. There seems to be a value currently around things being easy, and I've certainly had some.
Convenient.
Quick. And I've certainly had some experiences in my life which have been massive challenges. One of them was a 6-year battle to get access to my kids, which is why when the first thing that I said in terms of the 100th birthday was my children, because I fought for them. I went through the hero's journey and made sure that I was a present and available father. So and that's really worthwhile. So you're absolutely right. Something that's worth having is worth fighting for. And I learned from that experience, one of my strengths is being able to endure. And I've done lots of endurance. I've done 22 Cape Town cycle tours, which used to be the Argus, which is a 109-kilometer cycle tour. And just doing those endurance things and achievement of, or rather overcoming some obstacles and challenges is great for us, because they're going to come anyway. The universe is going to present them. So best we be prepared.
Yeah, well, we practice for so many other things to get good at it. And Joe DeSena, when he was on the podcast, talked about we need to practice forced adversity. We need to put ourselves in challenging situations so we're better able to cope. If we practice forced adversity, when we face it, one, we're going to have the confidence and the ability to quickly adapt and pivot, do all these things that we're hearing right now. And our mind is strong. Our heart's going to be able to handle it. And not only for ourselves, but we'll then be able to inspire and influence and uplift the others to do it. So, and
I think the key in there as well is also operating from a prefrontal cortex perspective. So having been prepared with a forced adversity, we're going to be able to be calm and think more clearly. I put myself through. I go for a run, and I run up hills, and I'm 51 now. So it's not and I'm 100 kilos. It's not as easy as I would like. And I remember being when I was 25, and yet what spurs me on is the idea of being able to feel that light bounding up the hills, and to find that, so. Yeah, I guess you're absolutely right. And the other thing you mentioned, competition. For me, one of the brilliant things is that there's no motion without friction concept. So that we need to challenge each other, and yet I think the biggest challenges with ourselves is sort of finding my next best step, so that I've got a better today than I was yesterday, in whichever way. And then a caveat to that is without judging myself harshly, so it's with focusing on I'm getting better, and these things I can see incremental growth. I forget this, Matt Webb at Mentor Group speaks about that. I forget the term that he uses, but I think that's really valuable as well, to focus on where we're going. And this is what we do as coaches, right? So where we're going, and then what are the steps we can achieve in order to get there, and seeing along the way what we've done, and then look back and say, hey, I started off down there. Look, way to go.
Yeah, because we're constantly setting a new baseline. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, with the concept of flow, talks about that zone that balances, as our skill changes and as the level of challenge goes up, we want to be moving up and to the right. But we're always setting new baselines, as we learn and develop. We should be able to increase the amount of challenge we can take and the amount of skill that we have as we, grow, learn, and develop, because we never arrive. It's
No.
part of the journey and the learning and development and growth. So
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, and that's also something I've heard is one of the biggest leadership challenges is, when a guy or a girl, lady or a gent gets to a specific point of achievement, growing $100 million company or whatever it happens to be, and that was the goal. Now what? And often they go into a therapeutic kind of relationship because there's either a drop off of confidence or that something happens, and it's, I think, as a result of us constantly setting those baselines rather than appreciating. And this is going to sound philosophical, but appreciating the journey and just knowing that it's not over until it's over.
Well, and it's awesome because, a lot of my research was built on goal setting theory, and there's a real risk in the achievement mindset. And a good friend of mine who works with professional sports and he talks about how athletes, because their thing, to get to a level of a professional, you're in the top 1% and you are dedicated and so focused, that becomes a focus of many areas of your life. Everything revolves around that. But what it creates in that achievement driving a lot of times is a void, whether it's in business or sport or life, that when we become so solely tied into that, our identity gets put there. And then if an injury hits or if, performance slips, we take it on personally because our identity gets attached to that. And, that idea of the void, like what else are we doing? This is where, my future, I want to focus on kind of the influence and impact beyond ourselves and making the world and humankind better. And I know you're doing that with the Mankind Project and the other projects getting involved in.
Well, that talks to the servant leadership, which you mentioned right at the beginning. And I think what happens is the ego gets in the way. And if we as servant leaders, and I had a great conversation with the guy who heads up a Portuguese university, Lisbon University's MBA school. If I'm not mistaken. I sat with him at a dinner at an event, and he was talking to me about his research on servant leadership. And for me, that was an epiphany from the perspective that I'd been reading about servant leadership, and yet he was able to really crystallize it in that it's not about or it's you are because I am because you are kind of thing. So if I'm focused on growing an organization, on growing a bunch of people, helping them succeed, by default, I will have the rewards and possibly the accolades.
Right. And it's what my buddy Ed Wallace calls worthy intent.
Worthy intent, I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, excellent.
Yeah, if we're all on this planet for ourselves, then it's going to be a hell of a lonely place. If we're all on this planet for each other and for the betterment of our species, then things will gradually get better. And I still can't think of that incremental improvement. Marginal gains, Matt calls it.
All right.
That's the one.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's someone else I need to get on the show because we both know Matt, and he'd be a great guest to get on.
Yeah, he really is a good guy.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Mark. And thank you, Hop Nation, for listening in. And all the best. Looking forward to seeing you here in North America when you get a chance to travel again.
Absolutely. I'm going to come and visit one of those hockey games that you've been telling me about.
Sounds good.
I've been dying to be an ice hockey player since I was a kid, and maybe I'll give it a shot.
Sounds good. I'll see if I can get you a tour into the dressing room and stuff as well.
Cool, Corey. Thanks so much for today. I appreciate you.
Thanks a lot, Mark. You have a great day.
Anytime.
And stay tuned, and we'll see you next week, Hop Nation.